Hello and welcome to this edition of Viewpoint. With me today is Dr. Michael Taylor, the Honorary Secretary of the Small Practices Association. Dr. Taylor, I would imagine that most GPs would know about the Small Practice Association. Is that right?
I would like to think that they do. However, I'm continually surprised that even after pushing quite hard for 10 years, there are pockets that don't know about us. Maybe this will help.
Well, what does the Small Practice Association represent, or who do you represent?
Well, our constituency is our members, and there are 1,200 of us, and we're principally single-handers and twosomes, but with some other GPs from larger practices as well. But we probably speak for considerably more than our numbers, certainly at present when so much is happening to affect small practices.
We'll talk about affecting small practices with revalidation, which is something that you have quite a bit to say about, isn't it, really?
Well, maybe not a lot, but I hope that what I have to say is pertinent.
And what do you think about revalidation in terms of your membership?
Yes, right. Well, we welcome revalidation, that's the first thing. The protection of the patient and producing quality care is what we're about. But we have some big worries, and the worries are not the principle, but how the system is going to operate. There are 3 or 4 different quality systems that at present are operational, of which revalidation is one, the CMOs is another, the GMCs is another. And what we're finding is that there's a greater percentage of overseas doctors who are failing at the various hurdles. And that doesn't seem to be ringing any alarm bells with any organisations really other than ours. But now I think the message is getting across, and the college, the GPC, and certainly the Overseas Doctors Association with ourselves are working to try to bring the enormous implications of what's happening to the forefront of everybody's mind, including the government's.
With overseas doctors, that covers quite a broad area, doesn't it? I mean,
yes.
that's every doctor that does not come from this country. So are there problems in any particular area of overseas doctors?
Yes. There was a great cohort of doctors were recruited, principally from the new Commonwealth, between 20 and 30 years ago. They're nearing retirement, and they have done this country, now their country, proud, and they've kept the NHS on its feet. And suddenly, after 25 years of neglect, and as I would argue, after 25 years of institutional racism, suddenly things change, and they're being asked to jump through hoops. And they, of course, find it more difficult than the doctors born and brought up here, who the system has looked after better. And so I think that we're faced with the uncomfortable position that we want revalidation, but we're very, very uncertain about how we treat the people that it finds wanting in some way. Because even if the system that is used to judge is applied completely fairly, as I believe it is, even if the criteria by which judgment is made are completely accurate, and I have some doubts, but let us presume that they are, then the result of that action could still cause big problems for all of the problems that have gone on in the previous 25 years that have been overlooked. And I think that it's very important for the Department of Health, the National Health Service Executive, to take this on board now. Because if they don't take it on board now, we doctors who see what is happening are going to have to try to do something about it. And if we're spending our energies doing that, we're wasting our energy. We should be spending our time driving the system to make it better.
Isn't the government looking at simply standardising the system by bringing in revalidation in that sense and focusing on overseas doctors to come up to a certain level, let's say, with language and certainly with comprehension and understanding of their patients? Isn't that a good thing, though?
There is some very interesting evidence to suggest that overseas doctors, their comprehension of their patients is in fact superior. And I can give you the reference. And it was in the BMJ of September the 15th last year that showed that in terms of enabling their patients to cope with their disease, with their illness, and maybe even with life in general, they seem to have an added something. So that isn't a fair comparison at all.
Well, let's move on now and look at the NHS plan. What does the SPA think of the plan as a whole?
As a whole? Oh, it's brilliant, isn't it? That at last the government is saying, Sorry, chaps. Yes, it has been underfunded. You know, what's £45 billion between friends? So, of course, we welcome what it says. But again, we've got another problem. Paragraph 8, stop 11, says that for single-handed doctors, we're going to treat you chaps differently than everybody else. We're going to negotiate with your representatives to try to tighten up the regulations with regards to you and nobody else. And if we can't negotiate with your representatives to do that, we are going to impose it on you. What do we do? Do we lie back and say, yes, please, you know, feel free, impose it on us, when we're stalwarts of the NHS just as much as they are? We would like to spend our time making things better and working with the plan. But the difficulty is because of this iniquity, which is not based on any evidence whatsoever, or I would challenge them to give me the evidence, and I've written to the Secretary of State for Health and to the Minister for Health saying, where is the evidence? That without that evidence, then of course we have to oppose it, when we would love to be supporting the bulk of the plan, which has to be good and beneficial for the patients and for NHS.
Can I ask you now about referrals and what the SPA feels about the controversy that's been in the marketplace recently about doctors referring patients to specialists? What position do you have on that? I mean, obviously some GPs have come in for severe criticism for over-referring.
Yes, I think all GPs need to examine what they do. I think one of the things that we've become better at over the last 10 years, everybody, is paying some attention to what we do. And there remains, even if you look at all the factors as to why some GPs refer more than others, in some specialties than others, there is a fourfold difference that has no explanation whatsoever. I suspect it's due to the personality of the individual, but we don't know that yet. That remains to be discovered. But though that is a tremendously important question, it doesn't really enter into the small practice or not small practice debate. I think that's us GPs as a whole need to look at that and do look at it.
Well, finally, what is the future for small practices?
It's good. It's good. It has to be good. There is new research coming out. We know that patients prefer us. We know that we enable patients more. I suspect, are going to learn from some research that's so hot off the press that it only comes out in December, that we are every bit as effective in small practices as large practices, and we're cheaper. We have been systematically starved of resource since 1966. So if we're as good and we're cheaper, then we're better. Our survival is assured.
What about individual doctors who don't belong to the Small Practices Association? How do you recruit them? What would you say to them to encourage them to join you?
I think the people join us at times of stress. We certainly have had a significant increase in membership in this past 2 weeks. Approaching 10% of our numbers are new members. The numbers of people who join and leave are very few. So I think it's try us and you won't find us wanting.
I know I said final question earlier, but what are some of the benefits, just very briefly, for GPs and other doctors who want to join?
Well, first, we're an educational charity. We see that as our mission, that we're trying to improve the quality of care for patients in small practices. We produce educational literature, we produce aids, we have conferences. We've got our annual conference coming up in Blackpool very soon. Then we have made some financial arrangements with other organisations, and there's actually financial incentives to join us. Third, politically, we have become, it's been forced upon us, the mouthpiece for small practices. And then fourth, and maybe most importantly, just fun. People join us, they seldom leave. They should just try it.
Well, it does sound like a lot of fun, and it sounds like there are some good incentives to join you at the SPA. With me in the studio today was Dr. Michael Taylor, Honorary Secretary of the SPA, and we'll be back with you with another viewpoint in the not too distant future. On behalf of the team here, thank you very, very much indeed for joining us, and goodbye for now.